welcome everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. Today, my friend Terry Hershey and I talk about his book, Soul Gardening, which after having written 16 books, this is one of his very favorites. And I have a feeling it's one of his favorites because it just might be a faithful autobiography of a man in search of himself and what it means to embrace a life on planet Earth. The closing words of his book tell it all. People who love this world, who pay attention, are all gardeners, because gardening is not just about digging or planting. Gardening is about cherishing. Delightful words. Let's bring on Terry to tell us more. Yo, Hirsch.
Charles.
What's up, amigo?
That was good.
That was good?
You know how you can tell yeah, that was good. You know how you can tell you're an insecure human being?
I know a lot of ways. Tell me one of yours.
When people introduce me and tell me how many books I've written, and then I have to correct them.
Oh, I thought it was 16. You know what is it?
18.
Oh, well, holy... Oh, so...
Actually, no, I have a different answer. The answer is, how many books have I written? I've written 32. I've published 18.
Well, I think that's a pretty amazing record. I think 18 published. There, you're in rarefied air to have 18 published books.
Well, no, actually, the rarefied air is not the number you publish; it's the number you publish that are of value. And I will admit that of my 18, 16 of them are of value.
Yeah, see, and I'm glad you put it that way. It's not I was expecting you to say the number that sell, and good books. Typically, really good books, literary books, are not. Are not number one bestsellers. They are not.
Oh, no. There's a staggering number of great stories about books that are extraordinary and did not sell.
Yeah, we could name a handful right now.
Correct, yeah. Soul Gardening is the best book I've ever written because it's the most personal.
Yeah, it's the most autobiographical. Tell a lot of personal stories, and you are as personal as you like to get. You really are keep your private self very private, and you sort of opened up yourself to a degree, but it was to an abnormal degree for you. So, what I want to do today, Terry, is I want to begin this show on your book at the end of your book. You close the book, Soul Gardening, with a brief paragraph that I referred to in the opening. And if you wouldn't mind, I would like you to read that entire paragraph. Do you know which one it is? It's on page 159.
Mm-hmm.
Read that paragraph for us.
Yeah, I'll actually start in the paragraph before.
Okay.
Gardeners are an odd lot. We are isolated by our own particular tastes, from primroses to antique roses, from austere to gluttonous, from sedums to cedars, from cauliflower to sunflower, from jacaranda to Jackman's blue, from New York to California, from a single clay pot to acreage as far as the eye can see. We live in our own worlds, fueled by dreams and imagination and fancy, and yet we are linked to gardeners past and present, sharing a common gusto for this experiment we call life, and this planet we call home. People who love this world, people who pay attention, are gardeners. People who are invested, people who are aware. They are gardeners regardless of whether or not they've ever picked up a trowel, because gardening is not just about digging or planting, for that matter. Gardening is about cherishing.
It's beautiful. Now tell me what you meant.
I moved to Vashon Island up in the Pacific Northwest 32 years ago, a little over, from a place called Orange County, California.
From Woodbridge, which is...
yeah, in Irvine, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the little stories I tell is the little boy that said to his mama, "Mama, Mama, listen to me, but this time with your eyes." The story is simply, am I present here in this moment? Am I present? And one of the things that happened to me in my move is that I found a place that invited me to be present, which meant to see, to hear, to taste, to touch. It meant to feel in the moment. It meant to give there. It meant to bring my whole self and whole heart there. And the garden did that. And there's several ways to describe gardening, as we can get into, but for the first time, I understood that story. It wasn't a technique, listen with your eyes. It was putting yourself in a place where your whole heart was there. And gardening did it.
It's sort of sans distraction that you have to, it's almost like, I understand it, not a conscious detachment from distraction, but you are so attracted to what you're doing that the distractions no longer pay heed in your life.
I think one of us remembers this, Charlie, from the time when we were 3 years old. We were there. We were completely in the moment, regardless of what it was.
Well, there was nothing else.
But distraction wasn't an issue.
Right.
I mean, I'm the last one of your guests who's going to get overly religious, but it's amazing to me that, the Jesus thing about if you want to be in the kingdom, you have to be a kid. You have to be a child. And that's what we're talking about. Listen, this time with your eyes. In other words, be here and now. For the first time, I was invited to be here now.
And I was invited through gardening.
Yeah, through gardening.
Which oddly enough began in Irvine, in that small little village called Woodbridge. That was the beginning of the gardening.
What's interesting about the gardening there is that so let me tell you a story. So, because I've designed gardens for 30 some odd years for people, right?
Right.
And when I go to the house and they're thinking through what they want designed. You know this. I've done your garden, right?
Yes.
But when I go to most couples' house, they show me magazines with these extraordinary photos, and they say, "Can you do that?" And I say to them, "Of course I can. With the right amount of money, I can do anything."
But so much of that depends on if I'm interrupting, tell me. I am. But it so much is on instant gratification. I want my house to look now like that garden that if done well has taken a decade or two to grow.
That's exactly what I say to them. I say, of course I can do that, but here's the problem: it won't be your garden. It'll be a landscape. And a landscape is for drive-by viewing. That's all a landscape is for public opinion. That's all a landscape is for. What do people think when they drive by?
But isn't that part of the process,
garden,
Terry? Isn't that part of the process of gardening that we begin? I remember my love for gardening began, of all places, perhaps in Palm Springs, with impatience and all of this, this Disneyland, very choreographed look about it, but it was still spectacular. And then I matured in my gardening to where those annual flowers mean nothing to me. And I like bushes, I like roses, I like flowers, but it's largely the placement of bushes and different colors, and that wouldn't have attracted me then. There is sort of a maturity in gardening, is there not?
Yeah, well, the maturity is not about necessarily about what you like, because what you like is, runs the gamut. You can do the annuals that are colorful, which is fine. You can do the shrubs. That's fine. That's what you prefer. But am I at home here is the question. That's the question.
I think that's a question.
Does it invite me to stop? Does it invite me to pay attention? Does it invite me to notice? Does it invite me to be grateful? Does it invite me to wonder and surprise and awe? If it invites me to all those, then you're in a good garden. If people say to me, how do you know a great garden? And they expect me to describe what's in it. No. You want to know a great garden? You sneak up on the gardener and you find that they have a smile on their face. You're in a great garden.
And dirt in their fingernails.
Exactly. You're in a great garden. They're thrilled to be there. In other words, they're thrilled to be there. The point is, they're thrilled to be there now. That's a great garden. I'm thrilled to be alive in this moment. That's a great garden.
You know what I want to do in this show? It sounds like we're talking about gardens, and I really, movement of the show, it's not so much about gardens as it is, I'd like to talk about the art of life through the lens of a gardener. I would like to talk about our individual lives, how our lives, our spirituality, our innermost self, what is important to us is revealed through the life and activities of a gardener. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, and that's the quote you read at the very beginning. I mean, yes. Anybody who's in love with this world, this moment, this time now, is a gardener.
So you wrote...
I did a walk today. Charlie, I just moved I had a 5-acre garden, 5 acres of a garden, 5 acres. I don't have that now. I have no acres at all. I live in a condominium, but I walk. I walk every day for 3 miles. And I walk by a couple things a day, and I have to stop and take pictures because I think that's extraordinary to me. And that reminds me of what it means to be a gardener. In other words, alive. I notice. I pay attention. I'm here.
Isn't that something in your book about walking, about Native Americans and walking and blessing? Do you recall that part in your book?
No, but it sounds great.
Yeah, it's about a Native American who, as he's walking, he says, I have just walked blessed ground, and as I proceed, I'm about to walk blessed ground. And
oh yeah, that's a great Native American thing.
Yeah, and he is pursuing.
It is blessed where I walk. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he is pursuing a blessed life by observing. Now, one of the things that you wrote that I'd like you to talk about, because I think this is important, and it's in our American pursuit of attaining what I'm calling a productive yet chaotic self-regard. And you write, life is not about being somebody. It's about being or sitting still with this somebody that you already are. That's a huge statement, because we live our lives trying to be somebody when you are suggesting we already are somebody if we pay attention to it.
Yeah, when I give, when I used to give talks to garden clubs, different garden clubs in different places in different states, I'd say to them, and these are people who are gardeners, right? Quote. But I say to them, do you know how you're in the presence of a true gardener when you're at their house, their place, the first words out of their mouth are, "I'm sorry. You should have been here last week. It was so amazing last week." Or next week would be extraordinary, which is to your point.
I find that sad. I find that sad.
I know, but the point is, it's brought into the whole thing that I have to impress somebody or prove something. In other words, the whole thing about my garden is not about me simply being here. In other words, it's about me having to do something so somebody will like it, which is your point about our cultural pressure about who we're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to quote you a lot because I underlined quite a bit in the book, and so you write about the twin pillars of worth, and I think this really fits in here. And the twin pillars of worth are busyness and accomplishments, and that is what we seek. In Richard Rohr's First Half of Life, that is what we seek. That's what you sought as the preacher extraordinaire and the personality extraordinaire. That's what I thought in my church life, my business life. And I found with these twin pillars of worth, which you call busyness and accomplishments, after I retired, I personally experienced both of those becoming twin pillars of self-loathing, because I didn't have busyness, I had boredom. I didn't have accomplishments, I had uselessness. Therefore, I was almost non-existent.
Yeah, and to that point, which is so extraordinary, is because we've what have we done? We've linked ourselves or connected ourselves to those measurements. Rabbi Abram Heschel said that we don't teach our children awe and wonder, we teach them how to weigh and measure. That's those two things. And if my spirit is about weighing and measuring, then when I get to a place where weighing and measuring doesn't matter anymore, retirement, whatever, then who am I?
And it is a struggle for people in retirement. It's a big struggle for people in retirement. It reminds me of the story that you tell of the people at a national park, and they take the adults on this tour and have the adults just gaze briefly at ever so stunning places, and they take children to one place and ask them, "What do you see? What is it all about? What do you feel?" And it should be the other way around, because the guardians don't ask adults, "How does this make you feel? What does this mean to you?" Because that's not measurement.
That's a good memory, Charles, because that's actually Joshua Tree National Park. That was back when we took our son Zach, when he was he was probably 3 or 4, and that's the handout they give kids to go in the park.
I have so many places I want to go, so I just want you to expand on whatever you want to, because I'm filled with questions, and I don't know if this is the right place for this question, but I think this is really important because it does fit into this accomplishment and what was the other one now? Accomplishment and busyness. And those are really important. I remember the days when, you wrote about daytimers. Well, those were a long time ago, but we had our self-worth was identified by how filled our daytimer was. If, we dare not say, I can meet on Thursday because I have a completely open day. You would not let anybody know you had an open day, because if you had an open day, that means somehow your value was in question. I wonder, do you think that is still true today? Do you think kids are thinking that? You think millennials are thinking that, or is that sort of a baby boomer mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's still true. I mean, I know that people still say to me, who email me, people who read my blog, Sabbath Moment, and they email me. And they'll inadvertently add, I know you're busy, so you don't need to answer this. And that puzzles me, because I love reading what they've written, so I'm curious where that is, and I understand it, though, too.
Do you respond?
I don't, you know what? I don't take the bait about the busyness part. I simply respond.
But you do respond to your emails.
Of course. I mean, the whole point is, you wrote to me, I'm going to write to you. But it's interesting that, just to the point of your question, is people, we inadvertently buy into that, and we don't ask something of someone connected to us because of those measurements about what is of value.
We are so ill-taught in the matter. I have sort of, I don't want to call it bastardized Robert Farrah Capon's statement, but I have a different way of stating it that I think is so true about life. And he says, we are like ill-taught piano students, more concerned with making mistakes than making music. And
yep, the flub that will get us in Dutch, he said.
Right.
Exactly.
I just put mine
in English. It's about the right notes.
Put mine in English.
Yeah, I know, it's about the right notes. It's about the right notes. And as long as I'm there, I miss it. See, that's the thing about the garden, which is extraordinary to me, is if I am out there and I'm glad to be alive, what I've planted is not significant or important. Who I've impressed with it does not matter. It's not an issue. In other words, I've gone to the music from the notes. The thing about the garden that for me is that was the first gift to me, is I laid under an very old cherry tree on a house I was going to buy in Vashon Island the first time, and I thought, I'm simply glad to be here. I don't know what this tree is called. Literally then, I didn't. I don't know what this tree is called. I don't know what these plants are around me. I simply am glad to be here. I can breathe. I have space.
What do you think ever got you there, Terry? Because, I think a lot of us have trouble, as I did, with the busyness and usefulness, that I don't even have the space within me to analyze that deeply, to be able to say,
well, back in the day, yeah, back in the day. Back to the Abram Heschel quote about weighing and measuring. In other words, you had a little check-off sheet about what was weighing and measuring, about what made a life valuable. In other words, whether it was productive, meaningful, and made a difference. And so you're asking what, and instead of simply living your life, instead of simply doing that, you're looking over your shoulder asking, how is it that I've made a difference? And which means that you are spending all of your energy focused on what someone thinks about it.
And the terrible thing about that is it's forgotten within a day or a week. That somebody,
nowadays within hours.
Yeah, and what difference did it make? It was worthless. One of the things that I took note to, and I wrote my own notes, and as we're talking about, back to your people that say, can you build a garden like this from a magazine? And it's sort of this instant gratification. What I think we learn from gardening, because even though I, like you now, have a very small spot and can't do much gardening, and I too loved to garden, not to the degree that you did, but I did spend, several hours a week in my garden. I'm calling it the spirituality of waiting, that you cannot be a good gardener, and I am discovering in my spiritual life now, I cannot be a good person, my innermost person, without the gift of waiting. And that instant gratification has instant dismissal, and the art of waiting, there's something happening all along. It's slowly. It's happening slowly. You quote Toad and Frog in that same situation. But you write that we North Americans are not good at waiting for the soul. We are not good about waiting for anything, for that matter. And then you tell this story about Africa and waiting. I thought that may apply here. Do you think that applies? The safari in Africa?
Well, tell me the story.
Oh, you want me to tell you the story in my version?
Mm-hmm.
Or just remind you of what it is?
Yeah, I've forgotten.
Oh, it's the one where the safari master leader, the white man from Europe, is bound and determined to make headway daily, and he's just...
Oh, right. Yeah, on the first day. Yeah, because he had stuff. He had to carry all his stuff. Because that's what makes us... he was North American, of course. That's what makes us North Americans. We have stuff.
We have stuff.
Yeah, stuff. Yeah, that's the old George Carlin thing. We have stuff. Stuff is what makes us who we are. Yeah, and so he hired people to carry all his stuff. Yeah, on the first day they got up very, very early and traveled very, very fast, went very, very far. Second day they got up very, very early and traveled very, very fast, went very, very far. Third day they got up very, very early and traveled very, very fast, went very, very far. And on the fourth day, he got up. And the tribes people who he had hired to carry his stuff refused to move, and the translator said they're waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. It's an extraordinary thing about gardening that that's the whole thing about downtime and dormancy, is the gift of waiting.
I had a thing that I wanted to close with, but I think it's important to talk about it now. And then we'll take a break after we do this. I want to focus on my favorite section of the book, which, you said I'm not from Seattle or Washington, because my favorite section is winter. And winter is the spirit of waiting, because it appears to spring and summer and even autumn people that winter is just a time of death, but it's not a time of death. It's a time of preparation for rebirth. And just a few years ago, I have a vivid recollection of sitting in what was odd. It was a viewing lounge in a museum just north of Copenhagen, Denmark, and it was on the coast. And it was a room. There were no books. There was, they weren't. I think you could take in a cup of coffee, but it wasn't a restaurant. It just had surrounded by windows, and you could view the outside terrain. And it was right on the coast. And I was stunned by the beauty of the barren trees lining the coast. There was something just absolutely, again, stunning, gorgeous about these barren trees, and it led me to write the opening words of an essay that winter in Scandinavia is underrated. I think the season of winter is underrated. Do you think that? Or do you just see work?
I had mute on, 100%. And I do a trip annually with a friend. We do wine tasting, but we always go in the winter in Europe. So we're in England, or we're in France, or we're in Spain, or wherever. But it's winter, And every time we go, I go to the gardens in those cities. And he says, what in the heck? What's remarkable about a winter garden is that at its core is what the garden is.
That's where its bones are, right?
That's the bones of the garden. I'm going to read one thing, and I know you're going to do your break, but I just
no hurry.
I opened my book to this because this is something that happened to me. Someone talked about gardening, and they said, I don't understand the winter garden thing. I don't get it. They were from a place that didn't have winter, quote. And they said, but the problem with your garden is there's not much to see here, is there? And I answered, true, but I guess that all depends on what you're looking for.
Right.
But if you look up, you will see the filigreed canopy created by our 150-foot cedar tree. Off to the side, you'll notice the mottled rust bark of our native madrone tree, revealing like a shedding skin the trunk with a polished gleam of a cinnamon swizzle stick. Or you'll admire the dark, rich green of our native yew, covered with red-hot tinged berries, resembling miniature pitted olives. Or be amazed by the fronds of licorice fern, a pendant from the trunks of a big leaf maple tree and woodland rock. And I go on. And then I say, so there's not much to see here, is there?
It does all depend on what you're looking for. It is that instant gratification. It is that instant orgasmic sort of feel, rather than the, if I want to put it in sexual terms, rather than the slow and endearing intimacy that is involved. I was thinking about something and it just eluded me. I was thinking of waiting and the importance of waiting, and in the last, my journey of the last 14 or 15 months, one of the things that I have really learned is waiting, and not to hurry, and to say, I don't have to have the answer today. I just have to trust that the answer will come in time. And it's like gardening, is it not? When I'm planting the seeds, I don't have to wait for, the spectacular roses the roses are never seeds, but I don't have to wait for the spectacular part of the garden to bloom. I can enjoy the process of it growing into bloom and growing in its way, in its own way. And I just think of the correlation to my life. It's the slow growing, and I'm feeling the slow growing, even at my age. I'm feeling a slow growing of maturity and deeper intimacy with the divine. But it is slow. It is. I can't. Every time I try to hurry, I screw it up. I just think there's something about waiting and being slow and being patient that is so critical and so almost non-existent in our culture.
Yeah, it's the permission to see the process too. Because what's amazing about, we're talking about gardening, but it's just nature. I mean, just watching what happens with nature over seasons and growth and growing and dying and new growth. What we've done in this culture, when you do weighing and measuring, back to Abraham Heschel, it's about performance. It's all about the, quote, bloom, which is fascinating because there's so much about what's going on that bloom is just a short period of time. And there's so much that's happening that's so remarkable. The way things grow and die and live, and the color, just the way it is. It's the gift of it all is remarkable.
You write about May Sarton, a famous gardener, and poet and essayist. And you write that May Sarton warned that gardening is not for the young because the young are too impatient and too self-absorbed.
That's a great quote. They can't handle death.
Yeah, that they can't handle death. They can't handle death.
They can't handle death.
But I like that impatient and self-absorbed as well as death, in that we are impatient and we want it now. So let's take a break, and we'll come back to the second half of the show. This is Charlie Hedges, and now this is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and I'm with my good friend Terry, and we're talking about his really delightful and quite enlightening book, Soul Gardening. Calls it The Cultivating of Life, but I call it Seeing the Art of Life Through the Lens of a Gardener. And we have talked about several subjects, and at this time, I want to talk about some of Terry's pathology, that growing up in a very organized and restrictive sort of culture. And he writes a lot in the book, especially in the first half of the book, about keeping our lives tidy, and that he devoted so much time and attention to that. And he now calls that a very uncomfortable place to live. And he says you may go as far as to say tidiness is a disease, or may I put it a dis-ease. My first question, Terry, if tidiness is a disease, does that give me permission to keep a messy office?
It's up to you, buddy. Messy is in the eye of the beholder. That's
you know. I have this office, and I will clean it up every quarter to 6 months, and it will be just immaculate. And really, it's not longer than a week, and it's a mess again. So I've just given up. I file by pile.
Which one feels good to you?
Both. I like it when it's clean. It feels, my mind feels clean, but my life works on filing by piling and just having the stuff around me. That's sort of who I'm.
Yeah, but that's the ongoing process of how you live your life. And as long as you're comfortable with both parts of that, then you're good. As long as you don't disassociate yourself from one of those, then you're good.
So what is it about keeping our lives tidy that tidiness is a disease?
Well, it's the same with the people who say, when you go to their garden and they say, I'm sorry. In other words, they assume their garden has to look a specific way. So it's not tidiness per se. It's that the assumption that it has to be a certain way. In other words, it has to look like the magazine.
So it's not about them, it's about pleasing other people.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with what they're glad with or happy with or what makes them glad to be alive.
How did you feel when your garden was sloppy and guests came to see it?
Oh, there's a great story about that, because I had a few gardens on Vashon, but the last one I had before I moved 4 months ago, I had for 20 years, and it was a pretty extraordinary garden, if I do say so myself. And people would come to visit, right? And I'd tour them. Well, there's a place on my garden. You've been to my garden. There's a pond in back. And there's a pond and a river that runs to the pond and the waterfall. Well, that wasn't there at the beginning because it takes time to build it. And like cobbler's children, they don't get their shoes right away, right? So it takes a while for a gardener who's designing to put in all the stuff. Well, that wasn't there. And so when people came to visit my garden, all that was there was a mud pit, quite large, 25, 30 feet across, in a long stream. but a mud pit, because it wasn't done yet. But I would make sure that people didn't see it because I didn't want to be embarrassed. And because I'd have to explain why it wasn't the way it should be.
Why it was incomplete.
Yeah. Well, the thing about being a mud pit is that you're not dealing with it. You're not worrying about it. And so whatever grows there, grows there. Zachary, my son, back in the day, he was young. He loved the mud pit. But whatever grows there, which meant what was growing there was dandelions.
Just in the mud pit. They didn't go outside.
In the mud pit, in the whole pond, because the rest beyond that was lawn and whatever, and stuff that I was worried about. In other words, that's the whole point. Stuff I was worried about taking care of for public opinion. This is interesting. And so, on one of these little groups that was making a tour, one woman, she didn't know she was not supposed to go over there, so she went over to the mud pit. And so I had to go over to explain to her, it's not going to always look this way, don't worry, etc. And, you're not playing by the rules. And I look and see what she sees, and the whole mud pit, the whole pond, which is now a pond, was covered with dandelions, literally golden dandelions. And the river had dandelions. Like someone had taken a vat of gold paint, and poured it down this river.
Had to be beautiful.
And this is what this woman, she said, this young woman, she says to me, "This is amazing. This is the most beautiful garden design I have ever seen in my life." And she said, "Whatever made you think to do this?" And I said, "It just came to me one day."
I woke up and there it was. Whatever made you think to build a pond and a river?
Yeah, the whole point is that was a turning point for me. She saw something. In other words, your question about creating a garden just simply for public opinion, I've missed the point.
And that was your story that you wrote quite frequently of LJ, was it LR? It appeared from what you wrote that he gardened specifically for himself.
100%. Yeah, I mean that 100% as it should be, because it should be a reflection of who you are.
Now let's apply that to life, Terry, because we live our lives according to what other people think it should be. So many of us do, when we really should be living it according to what, as you say, comfortable in your own skin, who you were created to be, what pleases you. And it is so difficult when we live in a culture of external standards that are dictating to us, that have become feeling. They feel like they're of ourselves. They feel, these outer pressures feel like they are internal, but they are in conflict with our internal selves. That makes perfect sense to me, but that may sound confusing to some people.
Yeah, it's not just doing what is quote pleasing to me, but I mean, it's what are the choices I make that make me not just glad to be alive, which is a big thing, but present. In other words, if I'm glad to be alive and present, then I bring my whole self and my whole heart to this moment, which means I'm available now to you in a way that I could have never been. Because prior to that, if I didn't bring my whole self and whole heart to this moment, I bring the self that has to ask, who should I be? What do they need me to be? Who am I supposed to impress? What am I supposed to do? And so I'm not even present for you.
That is where you write, I know you have this love-hate relationship with the notion of passion, and it's such a popular subject today. But you wrote something about passion that I have never heard, and I would like you to elaborate. You said passion is not something you do. Now, that right there contradicts most of what is taught on passion, that you do your passion and that you pursue your passion. But you suggest passion is not something you do, it is something that is done to you. That's a very different ideal.
Yeah, because it's receiving the gift of the grace of enough that is already inside you. If it's something I do, then passion is a race or a contest or a beauty pageant, and that's not the case. Passion is coming face to face with the gift of what is alive and well inside of you, embracing it. That's passion.
And passion can grow, can sort of diminish and grow. I have discovered with me that passion can grow, diminish, and grow in another area to where I end up with a plethora of passions, but I'm not passionate about all of them any longer as far as doing them. I still love them. You know, like painting for me. I was very passionate about painting, but that time ended. You know, I was very passionate about coaching baseball. That passion ended. Now I'm passionate about writing, and that's sort of always been. I have a feeling I'll be passionate about that, but I'm passionate about my life, my inner life with the divine. That is something, and I don't see an end to that. But it's a new passion. Am I passionate about painting? I still love going to museums. You know, I still love going to baseball games. But what I am going to participate my time in has to do with other passions. Do you think passions move like that?
Yeah, and here's the irony, Charles. None of them are. It's all the same, because every single one of them is a place where you brought your whole self. That's what makes it a passion. So it's not like one ends. You bring your whole self. In other words, you bring the real Charlie. That's the passion. So it's not like one is over. It's just that this is where I bring the whole Charlie. One doesn't end.
You know, Terry, I think that's a good way to wrap up. I like that soul gardening is that to which we bring our whole self.
100%. And you don't have to stop and weigh and measure. You know, you are. The first response is unbelievable gratitude.
And I would add an unbelievable, albeit it could be diminutive, but it is a sense of awe. It is a sense of wonder that there's something special going on about this.
100%.
Well, Terry Hershey, put this on your Sabbath moment as a push on your book, that this is such a wonderful book. And I want to thank you for taking me and our listeners through the idea of soul gardening, which is I think I've subtitled it. I don't know if it'll last at this, but I've subtitled it "Cherishing and Nourishing Your Innermost Self." And we.
Oh, I like that. That's good. That's good.
And we will continue to talk about that. At this time, you know, let me thank all our listeners for tuning in. We are so grateful for your dedication to our work, and I always want to ask you to check out our website at thenextchapter.life, Life. And as always, until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.